and welcome to today's Daily Chronicle. Today is Thursday, December 5th, 2024. Supreme Court seems ready to uphold ban on gender-affirming care for minors. The U.S. Supreme Court heard arguments in a challenge to Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for transgender youth. The Supreme Court's conservative majority on Wednesday seemed very likely to uphold Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for minors. In the last few years, fully half of the states have adopted similar bans. And on Wednesday's case provided the first test of those laws. 3 Tennessee families and the Biden administration are challenging the ban, which bar minors who say their gender doesn't align with the sex at birth from having access to puberty blockers and medications needed to transition to the opposite sex. Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar led off on Wednesday, telling the justices that the state cannot eliminate medically approved treatments for gender dysphoria, while allowing the same medical approved treatments for minors suffering from other conditions, from early onset puberty to endometriosis. Prelogar said that the state law singles out one particular use in its ban. It doesn't matter what parents decide is best for their children. She says, it doesn't matter what patients would choose for themselves. And it doesn't matter if doctors believe this treatment is essential for individual patients. She got immediate pushback from court conservatives. Justice Clarence Thomas went first, questioning whether the law is simply a case of age classification when it comes to these treatments as opposed to a ban. Chief Justice John Roberts followed up by noting that this ban involves medical judgments and studies conducted outside the U.S. Doesn't that make a stronger case for us to leave those determinations in the legislative body rather than to determine for ourselves, he asked. Justice Samuel Alito reeled off a list of studies from Sweden, Finland, and the UK, studies that show the damaging effects of these treatments for minors. In light of that, he asked Prelogar if she would like to modify her claim that there is overwhelming evidence of the benefits of gender-affirming treatment. No, replied Prelogar. Noting that while there is a lot of debate about how to deliver this care, there is a consensus that these treatments can be medically necessary for some minors. Pressed by Justice Elena Kagan about whether all state laws would have to be struck down under her theory, Prelogar said no. We do think there is a real space for states to regulate here. And I point to the example of West Virginia, added Prelogar. West Virginia was thinking about a total ban like this one, but then the Senate Majority Leader, who's a doctor, looked at the underlying studies, and the West Virginia legislator changed course and imposed a set of guardrails that are far more precisely tailored to concerns surrounding the delivery of this care. Justice Brett Kavanaugh raised concerns about minors who undergo these transition treatments, but later have regrets. Kavanaugh, who used to supervise his daughter's basketball team, also asked Prelogar, if you prevail here, what would it mean for women's and girls' sports? Those questions are different, responded Prelogger, because they pit the rights of trans kids to participate in sports against the rights of cisgender kids, concerned that they are being disadvantaged on the field. Both Justice Kavanaugh and Justice Amy Coney Barrett asked about parental rights to determine their kids' medical treatments, and noted that even if the trans kids lose this case, the parents can come back with a fresh challenge based on parental rights. Next up in the lectern and representing the trans kids was Chase Strangio, the first openly trans lawyer to argue before the court. He too faced questions about whether these are policy as opposed to legal questions. The Chief Justice focused on whether the Supreme Court even has the authority to address these types of questions. My understanding, said Roberts, is that the Constitution leaves that question to the people's representatives rather than to 9 people, none of whom is a doctor. Strangio countered that the role of the courts is to determine whether the law is narrowly tailored enough. Strangio said the Tennessee legislature had adopted a blunderbuss ban, overriding the careful judgment of parents who love and care for their children and the doctors who have recommended the treatment. Defending the ban, the Tennessee Solicitor General Matthew Rice said the law allows the use of drugs and surgeries for some medical purposes, but not for others. Thus, he maintained the law is based on purpose, not sex. But Justice Kagan wasn't buying that argument at all. The prohibited purpose here is to treating gender dysphoria, she countered. The whole thing is imbued with sex. It's a dodge to say it's not based on sex. The court's other 2 liberals followed up. Justice Sonia Sotomayor asked whether, given Tennessee's logic, the state could block gender-affirming treatment for adults too. Rice responded in the affirmative, saying that democracy is the best check on potentially misguided laws. Justice Sotomayor shot back that when you're 1% of the population or less, it's very hard to see how the Democratic Party is going to protect you. Throughout arguments, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson raised the concerns about the bigger consequences of the courts upholding Tennessee law, saying, I'm worried that we're undermining the foundations of some of our bedrock equal protection cases. Justice Neil Gorsuch, usually quick with questions, had none on Wednesday. He is the author of the court's only decision on trans rights, upholding those rights in the context of employment. Rights group. Afghan women barred from studying nursing and midwifery. Nurses caring for patients at Wazir Akbar Khan Hospital in Kabul on September 1st, 2021. Since assuming power that year, the Taliban has curtailed educational opportunities for women. This week, they reportedly banned women from studying nursing and midwifery. The Taliban supreme leader has reportedly ordered a ban on women attending nursing and midwifery institutes, closing a rare avenue they had to pursue an education beyond the 6th grade. Human Rights Watch says the ban was ordered by Taliban leader Hibatullah Akhundzada and conveyed to the Ministry of Public Health on Monday, then communicated to private medical training institutes soon after. Although the ban has yet to be formally announced, two government officials who spoke to NPR on condition of anonymity because of the matter's sensitivity confirmed it. In addition, several nursing and midwifery students told NPR that this week they were not allowed to attend classes. The European Union has condemned the ban, while the United Nations Chief Mission in Afghanistan said it was extremely concerned about a reported directive that was preventing women and girls from attending private medical institutions. The state of education for girls under Taliban rule. The ban reflects an ongoing Taliban effort to curtail education for girls beyond grade 6. Despite the Taliban's policies, girls and women still have some options. In certain parts of the countries, Taliban officials have quietly ignored the ban, allowing a small number of girls to take classes offered by private educational institutes and charities. And in February 2024, an important loophole opened for women. Officials in the Ministry of Public Health successfully lobbied the hardline Taliban leaders to allow women to take nursing and midwifery courses in a handful of mostly private training institutes and learning centers, according to Ashley Jackson, who closely tracks developments in Afghanistan as co-director of the Center of Armed Groups, a think tank based in Switzerland. One motivation for this February decision was that in some provinces, the Taliban does not allow women to seek treatment from male medical professionals. This new decree banning women from nursing and midwifery training will result in unnecessary pain, misery, sickness, and death for the women forced to go without health care. Said Sarah Fitrat of Human Rights Watch in a statement. Students turned away from class. Human Rights Watch says that the ban was ordered by a Taliban leader, Hibatullah, and conveyed to the Ministry of Public Health on Monday, then communicated to private medical training institutes soon after. 5 Afghan women who were studying nursing and midwifery told NPR that they turned away from their respective private institutions this week. They spoke to NPR on condition of anonymity to avoid being identified by authorities. One 22-year-old nursing student said she learned about the ban when her friends began calling to express their condolences. "Are you telling the truth?" she said. She asked them. The young woman went to her institute to case her friends were misinformed. "One of her teachers told us to go home. The institute closed until further notice," she said. One 22-year-old who was studying economics before all women were banned from university study in 2022 told NPR she signed up for nursing classes, desperate to continue studying. She too rushed to her classes on Tuesday after word of the ban spread on social media, hoping it was a false rumor. She said the teachers were apologetic, but unfortunately we were not allowed to enter, she said. Unfortunately, we could not do anything. This is bad news for all Afghan people. She said angrily, because men cannot become midwives in Afghanistan. Men are not allowed to be midwives because of strict gender segregation customs. Challenges for medical education institutions. Even before this week's news, medical education institutions have found it challenging to include women. Medical schools have not been functioning as they should in the last 3 years, said Pashtana Durrani, founder of Learn Afghanistan, an organization operating secret schools in Afghanistan, as well as maternal health clinic where they trained midwives. As they are doing now is closing any loopholes of the ban on higher education for females, she said. Many of us have faced increasing harassment from the authorities, she said. In just the last 2 weeks, our staff were detained and the Taliban, asked us for money to be allowed to stay open. She told NPR, adding that the constant harassment forced her organization's schools to transition to online classes. We don't have any in-person classes at all because they forced us into shutting down the last of our training program. When we trained the younger women, I had a hope that maybe all these girls would graduate and establish their own institution someday, but now that seems unlikely. Durrani said, people often say that under the Taliban, women are just left to reproduce. Well, now with this new ban, women are left to reproduce and then die on the same table because there will be nobody to help them. That's what it has come to, Durrani said. Indeed, Afghanistan is one of the most dangerous places in the world for a woman to give birth. According to a December 2023 statement from Stefan Durjak, spokesperson for the UN Secretary General, a woman dies every 2 hours across Afghanistan in birth-related complications. And the United Nations Population Fund, which tracks women's healthcare globally, reports that the country needs at least 18,000 more trained midwives to ensure basic maternal care to Afghan women. The ban on women studying basic nursing skills makes absolutely no sense, even according to the Taliban's own logic, says Jackson of the Center on Armed Groups. She said that even during the Taliban's rule in the 1990s, considered more extreme than the present government, they allowed women to take some medical courses. Jackson also notes that previous exceptions allowing women to study nursing and midwifery shows that there are people inside the system fighting for more sensible policies who realize that Afghanistan needs midwives, it needs female doctors, it needs female nurses. But ultimately, the commands of Aka Husada, their spiritual leader, takes precedence. We know that his beliefs are radical to the extreme, Jackson says. There's a real paranoia and a fear of losing control. I think one of the ways that he, as well as the Taliban in the past, have expressed that is through the control of women's bodies. Even as officials were turning away young Afghan women from healthcare education this week, other Afghan women were hoping that soon there would be some accountability for the Taliban's denial in their human rights. This week, the International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, said he could announce that very considerable progress has already been made in the investigation of allegations of gender persecution in Afghanistan. I am confident that I will soon be in a position to announce concrete details, said Khan. One researcher at Human Rights Watch, Fershata Abbasi, believes that Khan's statement indicates that he would soon request applications for arrest warrants for Taliban officials. Abbasi is from Afghanistan and currently lives in the United Kingdom. Justice will prevail, she wrote on X. As Supreme Court, vaping may be frowned upon, but that could change with Trump. The Supreme Court heard arguments on the FDA's refusal to approve flavored e-cigarettes over public health concerns. At the Supreme Court on Monday, the justices seemed skeptical about challenges brought by the vaping industry. To regulations put in place by the Food and Drug Administration. Vaping is a tobacco alternative that is quite the rage among middle and high school kids, but also can help some adults, smokers, wean themselves off more damaging tobacco products, mainly cigarettes. If you don't know much about vaping, be assured that teenagers do. For the uninitiated in recreational stimulants, vaping is the inhaling of an aerosol mist from an electronic cigarette or similar device, which heats up a nicotine liquid to create a vapor that looks like smoke. It's an alternative that helps some smokers get off more damaging tobacco cigarettes, but it's also a product that's popular with middle and high school kids. In 2023, over 2.1 million young people, including 10% of high school students, reporting e-cigarette use, and other more than a quarter reported daily vaping. The focal point of the case in 2009 law enacted by Congress that gives the Food and Drug Administration a mandate to curb the availability of nicotine products for minors. In the years since then, Congress has strengthened that mandate, and the FDA has made it all but impossible for vaping companies to sell their products using flavors that appeal to kids. Flavors like Jimmy the Juice Man Peach Strawberry, Rainbow Road, and Mother's Milk and Cookies. The companies contend that the FDA has acted in an arbitrary manner, effectively setting standards that are a moving target. Arguments at the court. At the Supreme Court on Monday, the government's lawyer told the justices that Congress itself specified that the flavored cigarettes and flavored vaping products had to meet a high bar because they particularly appeal to minors. Under the statute, a company must show its product is more likely to get adults off tobacco cigarettes and less likely to be used by underage kids. To date, only 27 vaping products have been approved, out of hundreds of thousands of submissions, largely because the agency concluded that there is no way to allow flavored e-cigarettes to be marketed without harming large numbers of children. In the Supreme Court chamber on Monday, Chief Justice John Roberts asked Deputy Solicitor General Curtis Gannon, the government's lawyer, whether the government has an obligation to tell people what they have to do to comply with your regulation. Gannon replied that the FDA gave these vaping businesses fair notice that their business model is a risky one. As the evidence the companies presented, they were barking up the right tree, said Gannon, but they didn't have sufficient scientific evidence to satisfy the requirements of the statute. Gannon noted that the Congress was concerned about the fact that most people who become addicted to nicotine start when they are underage, at a time when the adolescent brain is particularly vulnerable to the effects of nicotine. Or as Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson put it in referring to the statute, this is not a discretionary call on the FDA. Pressed by some of the conservative justices, Gannon pointed out that the agency approved not only tobacco-flavored e-cigarettes, but most recently, it approved e-cigarettes that are methanol-flavored. The agency justified its decision on grounds that many smokers like the methanol taste, and methanol e-cigarettes deliver less damaging nicotine and are more helpful for some adults seeking to wean themselves from the nicotine habit. Lawyer Eric Heyer, representing the vaping companies, told the justices that without the approval of more flavors, many small vaping companies will be forced to shut their doors. But Justice Elena Kagan replied that the difficulty with that, and the FDA, I think, has tried to document this, is that blueberry vapes are very appealing to 16-year-olds, not 40-year-olds. Faced with the court's doubts, Heyer pointed out that once Donald Trump becomes president in January, the FDA's policy could change, with a new administration coming in. Heyer observed the president-elect is on record saying, "I'm going to save flavored vapes. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like." A decision in this case is expected by summer.